Good to go? All right. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Women's Club. I'm Kevin Winge. I'm the Executive Director of the Women's Club. We are thrilled to work with all of our partners. The Women's Club is a nonprofit organization committed to doing our part for civic engagement, so we're happy to host events like this. A little bit of housekeeping. You are on the only floor in the Women's Club that does not have restrooms, so if you haven't been here before, one floor down, either the stairwell or take the elevator to 3, because believe it or not, you're actually on floor 4. So other than that, I think you'll find everything. Keeping with civic engagement, though, there's a number of other events coming up. This Thursday at St. Mark's is a listening session with Sheriff Witt. So please, if you're available, you can find out info on St. Mark's website or our website. A week from Thursday, I don't know the exact date on that, but City Council member Katie Cashman is hosting an evening to discuss the budget process in the city of Minneapolis, and joining Katie that evening will be the city's budget director. So there will be an opportunity, and that's also on our website, that all of these things are obviously free and open to the public. So that's a week from Thursday if you want to do a deeper dive on the city of Minneapolis's budget. On October 1st, we are hosting a watch party for the vice presidential debate. That's in our theater on the first floor. So at 8 o'clock, there is a watch party. If you want to enjoy the debate with 600 of your closest friends, come in. Prior to that, at 5:30, some of you may remember Valerie Plame, who was formerly with the CIA. Valerie Plame will be here also giving a free talk at 5:30 on the CIA, her role, what happened to her when she was out in the CIA, and specifically talking about weapons of mass destruction. And then the last piece, we're working with the League of Women Voters Minnesota. On the Wednesday after the election, there will be an election recap at the Women's Club, and Lori Studevant will be moderating a discussion on the results of the November election. So with that, welcome, and Pam, I think you've got more information.
Thank you. Thank you, Devin, for all of that information. That just reminds me how exciting it is. It's not on? Oh.
It's on. We just got
Okay.
to get a little closer.
Up. Sorry. Okay. What do you think? Here. Okay. Sounds good. Thank you. Again, thank you, Devin. And I was just saying his introduction reminded me of how exciting it is to be a member of, live in Minneapolis, because there are just good things going on by lots of different organizations, and it helps us as citizens to become involved. My name is Pam Telleen, and I'm a member of the League of Women Voters, but I am not a constituent of Minnesota House District 61A. I'm pleased to be moderating this debate because, as I said, I love when we have our community get together to become involved in the process. In order to make it possible for all residents to participate fully in this event, we do have Somali and Spanish interpreters here with us tonight. Would you raise your hand? We have Somali in the background and Spanish here. So if you need the interpreter devices, please see one of these women, and also it will be live streamed, and it will be live streamed in the different languages, so you'll be able to hear it in your preferred language. Now I get to give my political PSA about the League of Women Voters. We are a volunteer organization with a long history of providing unbiased candidate and issue information that's widely used by voters regardless of their party or beliefs. This forum is sponsored by many people, the League of Women Voters, the Women's Club of Minneapolis. Thank you so much for this beautiful location. The Downtown Minneapolis Neighborhood Association, Citizens for a Loring Park Community, AIDA Leads, Colectivo Bilingüe, or Minneapolis Bilingual Education Collective, and the League of, as I said, the League of Women Voters Minneapolis. The views expressed are those of the candidates and are not those of the co-sponsors. Neither the League nor any of the co-sponsors endorse candidates or political parties. We're holding this forum for voters to hear from the candidates. So you are here tonight to hear firsthand, and the people who are viewing on the video to be able to hear the candidates' ideas and compare their ideas and make up their own minds. This forum is being held in front of a live audience in the Women's Club at the Women's Club of Minneapolis, and is being live streamed to the League of Women Voters Minneapolis website, which is lwvmpls.org. There you will find a YouTube recording of the forum, and it will be available in its entirety, and it will also have closed captioned options for multiple languages. Thank you to N6 for the production and recording of this event. We asked earlier that campaign buttons and campaign logos not be visible. I don't see any, so thank you for complying with that stipulation. Now I ask you please to remain as quiet as possible while the candidates are speaking so that everyone can hear the discussion. Please hold your applause until the very end of the forum so that the candidates have a maximum time to respond to the questions. And finally, please silence all of your electronic devices. I'd like to remind us of what the areas and the districts are that people are representing, and in case any of you aren't aware that District 61A is located in west central Minneapolis. It's a Minnesota House of Representatives that includes all or part of the neighborhoods of Harrison, downtown Minneapolis, Loring Park, Elliott Park, Bryn Mawr, Lowry Hill East, Kenwood Isles, and Cedar Dean Isles. Both candidates on the ballot were asked to attend, and as you can see, they both agreed to be here tonight. In alphabetical order, the candidates are Katie Jones from the Democratic Farm Labor Party and Toya Lopez from the Green Party. I want to thank ahead of time the candidates for engaging in respectful and civil discourse, not civil disobedience, civil discourse. We do have timekeepers here tonight. You'll see right in front of the speakers, and they will be holding up signs when your time has reached 15 seconds, 30 seconds, and stop. And we just ask that if you're in the middle of a sentence, you finish the sentence, but then stop at that point in time. 30, 15, and stop. Don't panic, because there's a lot of time. Okay. We do expect this forum to last about an hour. Questions from the community members have been submitted in advance to the League of Women Voters, and during the forum, we'll take written questions from the audience. So if any of you have some written questions, you may bring them up here to this table, where we have League members who will take the questions and sort them, and also collate them together so they fit the various different topics that we want to cover tonight. We ask that your questions be carefully worded, and that they ask a question and not make a statement. We also look for balance in our topics, and we want to have topics that affect us locally in 61A, in Minneapolis, and in the state as well. To get as many topics as possible, we will limit the number of questions for each category. And we might consolidate some questions if the time allows, and also if we have multiple questions about one topic. If you ask a question and you feel your question has not been addressed tonight, I encourage you to stay afterwards and talk to the candidates themselves. Now, for the candidates' opening statement, we'd like to ask you to address the following question. Why are you running for the Minnesota House of Representatives District 61A office, and what are your qualifications? The women drew numbers earlier, and Katie will go first.
Right. Hello, my name is Katie Jones. Thank you all for being here tonight. I'm an engineer, a climate advocate, and a community builder looking to serve you in the Minnesota House. I come from a family of small business owners from rural Indiana, but I fell in love with Minnesota at an early age because of a summer language immersion camp in Bemidji. That's where I met my husband, and about 10 years ago, we bought our house over in the Wedge. And as soon as I got there, I got involved. In the neighborhood board, I was board president, I ran our first strategic plan, and then I got involved in a number of city, county, and state level committees. And it's not because I like meetings, but it's because I really care about people and the planet and about showing up for this community. I'm running because I want to build a more just, resilient, and thriving Minnesota with you. And it starts with justice for a reason. We can't do any of this work without ensuring racial justice, without standing up for LGBTQ rights, and protecting our reproductive rights. I'm also running because I want to build a resilient Minnesota, one that can withstand tough challenges. And we've seen a lot of big issues here in our community, from the pandemic to economic downturns, and also, public safety and the crisis within our public schools. We've got a lot of work to do, because at the end of the day, we want to build a thriving Minnesota, one that invests in people and in our communities. The outgoing Representative Frank Hornstein has been leading this district for 22 years with compassion and collaboration. And I consider him a mentor. I've worked with him on a number of climate and transportation laws, so I want to continue his legacy. So I'm ready to get to work with you, listen to you, and I'm excited to answer your questions tonight, and I hope to earn your support for November 5th election. Thanks.
Thank you. Toya?
Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming out. I am your neighbor from Elliott Park, and I also wanted to just put a little note out there that for every constituent who's in the district, that you also feel emboldened to seek a leadership role if you wish, as that is a qualification enough. But as far as other qualifications go, I have been working in public health and climate justice for the past 7 years, since I first moved to Minnesota, to Minneapolis, when I got my master's in healthcare administration at the University of Minnesota. I've also been on a handful of climate and health boards, as well as neighborhood boards as well, and I've been doing a lot of work in the community with mutual aid, especially regarding housing and disability justice. And I'm running because 60% of our unhoused neighbors are employed, and 60% of Americans are one check away from becoming homeless themselves. This is a health issue. This is a public health crisis. And speaking of public health crises, while we've made sweeping advancements in climate in our state, which is great, we still have seen failures to really hold ourselves accountable, especially when it pollutes our frontline communities, our BIPOC neighbors, especially with Line 3 and the Smith Foundry. And in that latter case, we had to have the federal government be involved before we actually made change. And I'm also running for representation because as a Latina person, as someone who's also a renter, as someone with disabilities, I want to see people like me in leadership roles, and I hope that I can also be that for the rest of my neighbors.
Okay, thank you. Now we'll move to the questions that were submitted earlier to the League of Women Voters, as well as any questions that come from the audience. So we'll start with a question regarding government. And Toya, you will go first. So the question is, what is one bill that you would like to pass in your first year of legislation?
So one bill that I would like to pass is a lifting, actually, of the ban on rent control. As I've mentioned earlier, in regards to affordable housing, that's something that's deeply personal to me as well, having so many neighbors who can't even afford affordable housing. The other day, I picked up a pamphlet for one of our affordable housing providers, and the studio was listed at $1,000. Another thing that I'm interested in, which is hopefully appropriate with this question, is also making sure that we're supporting all those who have Section 8 vouchers. And so making sure that landlords can't say that, oh, we don't want your government money to pay for your housing, especially in an affordable housing crisis. I would say outside of that, I also support housing cooperatives and especially community-driven and culturally relevant solutions to our unhoused neighbors and those who are also housing insecure.
Okay, thank you. Katie?
So I'm actually thrilled to hear that we both really, really care about housing because it is such a fundamental right. It's something that none of us can thrive or succeed in life without. And right now, we are severely challenged in Minnesota. We have a lack of 100,000 units of housing in this state. We simply don't have enough. And as much as price controls are a strategy, we simply have to make sure that we are legally allowed to build more housing. And right now, it's too difficult. There's too many restrictions in the way. And actually, before I jumped into this race, I was part of a housing coalition of labor and environmental groups, housing groups, transportation groups. We're all working together at the state level to try to make it easier to build more housing along commercial corridors, within our neighborhoods, all doing it within the context that can make sense, but where we are growing our housing stock. So I know how to build the coalitions that are necessary in order to get that done. We got 1 out of our 6 policies through the legislature last year. I want to continue growing that. And because we know that housing is such a fundamental piece for why we're doing this. We need to, it's fundamental for student success, it's fundamental for housing success, it's fundamental for our health. And so that's why housing is going to be a key part of the things I want to do at the legislature.
Okay, well, since both of you addressed housing, we'll go on to our housing topic and let you expound a little bit more on that subject. Do you see housing availability as an issue throughout the state? And what is your view on a bill to change zoning from being a locally determined issue to a state-level policy decision? Katie, you'll go first.
Mm-hmm. So this segues into just what I was talking about. And so, in our state, cities do have control over zoning currently. And that has given some success for some types of people in our state, and it has come at the disadvantage for others in our state. And we need to recognize that. That being said, there is value to land use decisions being made at a local level because people at a local level kind of understand what's happening there. So if the state is to be moving into this area, we have to do so with thought and with care. And so when I talk about that there were 6 policies that we were working on as part of that coalition, that was taking narrow steps, like, for example, allowing multifamily buildings by right on commercial corridors. There are currently cities in Minnesota where you cannot build an apartment building on a commercial corridor. You can have, a tall building with offices, but you can't have a multifamily building. So taking a targeted approach like that, I think can really balance the needs for the region while also making sure that, that there are still decisions made at the local level.
Okay, Toya?
Yeah, thank you for the question, and for the first point about is housing availability, and especially affordable housing availability, a huge issue? Yes. Oh my goodness, yes. So we don't have a housing crisis. We have an affordable housing crisis. My neighbors, as you might have remembered, the 11th Avenue apartment fire, they all lost their homes, of course, and in searching for other places to live, there are vacant units in my neighborhood. However, nobody could really afford them. They couldn't afford to live there. So in terms of housing availability, yes. And also, I was at one of the budget meetings here for Minneapolis regarding agate housing, which is also housing for folks who need affordable housing and extra help. We were also unable at the state legislature level provide that funding needed to make sure that our current housing stock with affordable housing isn't deteriorating. And then quickly on the zoning at the state level, I do believe that context is very important. And so for every municipality, for every place, that for them to have their voice heard, and also that there are some needs that, especially regarding like making sure that we have certain housing stock available or other buildings, that would be to look at the state level.
Okay, thank you. All right, now we move to the economy, and I want to kind of combine two because they're about seniors and economy. So where do you stand on property tax relief for seniors, and what is your plan addressing increasing needs of seniors, such as the cost of long-term care, wages of caregivers, et cetera? We start with Toya.
Thank you for the question. I have been talking to a lot of my neighbors who are seniors, who are also currently living in assisted living. And so I'm going to talk a little bit more about the long-term costs of care and as well as of housing. As for a lot of these folks, some of my neighbors who are in their own homes, right, they can't afford to actually do the upgrades needed in their homes to stay in their homes, especially since if they're only getting Social Security. And in that aspect, I do want to support inclusive financing so that, especially with all these older buildings, I don't know if you've been in them, insulated with literally newspaper and straw, some of these very basic efficiency upgrades can do so much to help them. I don't have a particular stance on property tax relief. However, I do want to talk about the inefficiency of our current programs and services, especially for elders, and making sure that when it comes to providing these programs, we're not also like breaking apart couples who then have to house in two different places because the program that they're going through can only really afford to house them separately, which doesn't quite make sense. So those efficiencies and integration I'm also interested in.
Okay, thank you. Katie?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think property taxes are on a lot of people's minds these days. We've been seeing the news, hearing what's coming down the pike for, from the city level, from the county level, it's hitting us at multiple levels. And it's painful. And it's not only property taxes, but it's insurance is going up. So just the general, we're feeling it everywhere. And so I think one of the key ways that we can help address this is by expanding our property tax base here in Minneapolis. Now, what do I mean by that? That does not mean increasing your property taxes. It means increasing the number of people who live here so that we're spreading the taxes that need to be paid across more people. And so a couple of ways where I think we can do this. One is by converting some of our offices to residential buildings, especially in downtown. We know that in order to make downtown revitalized, we need more people in downtown, and that's one way to do it. Another idea is through a land value tax, and I won't get into the specifics about that, but basically it allows for us to better value the land, particularly in downtown, where it does have an actual high value to us, but it's not evident in our property taxes. The other thing I'll just mention with regards to seniors and long-term care, I was actually reading about that in my Reader's Digest last night. This is a thing that is top of my mind because it's something that we're seeing in too many families.
Okay, thank you. We'll continue on the economy theme. And the next question is, what will you do to support an economy that makes our state attractive to people and businesses? And Katie, you go first.
I really like this question because I'm not originally from Minnesota, so I think about what makes me want to be here and want to live here. And I think as we're hearing more and more, it's because of our quality of life. And so those are the types of things that I want us to continue to invest in. I come from a family of small business owners, so being mindful of our taxation on our businesses as well as our residents needs to be balanced. But I think the reason why people stay here is because of our high quality of life, and the affordability of it. Another thing that I think we're going to see more and more is our climate refugees. Actually, one of my volunteers on my team, she moved from Arizona because there's a lack of water. It's getting hotter and hotter. And so I think that's something that is going to be attracting Minnesotans. And that's going to be something that's on top of my mind because we need to, again, have enough housing for people to be here, that we're planning for the infrastructure to be able to accommodate them. I've actually sat on the city's Capital Long Range Improvement Committee, which is the infrastructure committee, for the last 8 years, and so have seen the types of investments that we need to be making to accommodate that growth. So I think growth is important. We need to be balancing our taxation with making sure that that what we bring in is really going to investments in our community, because that's why people want to stay here.
Thank you. Toya?
And I want to definitely echo the point about climate refugees, as I have talked to particular people who have moved. Well, this particular person moved to Duluth, particularly because they were looking at climate in the future and saying, Minnesota is a good place to be. And speaking more about how we make our economy more resilient, I believe that will go in tandem with how we are also attracting economy to flourish from within as well, as especially when it comes to notions of the circular economy or keeping things as local as possible. I want to support worker-owned cooperatives, or just, your general housing cooperatives, utility cooperatives, where average people are also the co-owners of those businesses. Also, Minnesota has a great track record with unions, right? And so being able to be like, if you come here, your working conditions will be better. You will be heard. And especially when we're looking at providing funding for either BIPOC farmers or BIPOC small business owners, letting people know that this is a place where you can come, where not only you will be appreciated, but you can also make a difference in the community that you'll be in. I would find that to be really cool, so I'd move there.
Okay, one more economy. It's a big issue. Where do you see funding coming from to support the 2024 Minnesota legislative agenda? What, if anything, would you be willing to give up? Toya, you're first.
Yeah, thank you for that question there. I would say in order to support a lot of our really ambitious goals that I'm hoping to be able to be a part of here, one thing I would like to definitely propose or support is a mansion tax, which for a lot of folks, housing is about like $300,000 if you do own housing. And so this would be for much higher. We're talking about like $1 million, okay? And so being able to equally spread that out for a lot of other folks who do also need like that support, especially if those assets are now pretty old. And also what I would be willing to give up is more spending on supposedly profitable businesses or infrastructure. Perhaps we shouldn't be giving loans to Lockheed Martin. Perhaps we shouldn't be giving loans to the US Bank Stadium, especially when just a few blocks over we have affordable housing that is in peril of closing. So as far as those things, I'm willing to give up on corporations and give that money to people.
Thank you. Katie?
So I think I'll start with my general philosophy around taxation. I'm a DFLer. I believe in progressive taxation, so making sure that those of us who have more are contributing more to our public goods and services. Because really that's what our government should be doing, is funding things that are for our collective good and helping to build a more just, resilient, and thriving Minnesota. So basically correcting a number of those inequities that have been baked into our system for a really long time, because we know that is for the collective good. And so I think it's we need to be looking at this holistically about what we're spending and also how we're taking things in. With regards to how we're taking things in, we should be taxing things that we know are not aiding or adding to the wellness of our community, right? Pollution, for example, is something that is not good for our health, and it often costs us a lot of money. And anyway, we want to discourage that type of behavior. On the flip side, we want to encourage things like the building of new housing or the conversion of offices to homes in downtown. So we need to be looking at our tax structure and be in that way. The other thing with how we're spending our funding, I think looking at some of our infrastructure spending is smart. In Minnesota, we have the 4th highest number of lane miles in the country. That means we have a high number of roads, and we need to take a look at that.
Thank you. All right, now we will switch in to the topic of public safety. There is great, there is great concern with crime and gun violence in our communities. What legislation or specific ideas do you have to respond to residents' needs for safer communities? Katie, you're first.
Well, let's just start out with the basic value that everyone in our community deserves to be and feel safe. And that is in every aspect of our lives, we should be able to go to the grocery store feeling safe, we should be able to play in our park feeling safe. And I think it takes working across jurisdictions to be able to achieve that. The local response is provided by the city, and so, I need to be communicating, if I am able to hold this seat, with the city council and with the mayor, making sure that communication is happening, and that we are fully funding our city so that they are well-resourced to be able to provide that local response. So over the last, about 20 years ago, local government aid, which is the money that comes from the state to the city, went down for Minneapolis. And especially right now, Minneapolis is hurting. It's time to turn the spotlight back onto Minneapolis because we are the economic engine of the state. When we do well, the state does well. And so we need to make sure that local government aid is coming back to Minneapolis to fully resource what we need. When it comes to gun control, I think there are a couple of good ideas that are out there. I'm looking to groups like Moms Demand Action, and I'm endorsed by them, so that we're working on safe storage laws. I'd like to ban automatic weapons, and smart policies like that have broad support from Minnesotans, I think are things that we should be working on at the legislature.
Thank you. All right, now we'll switch to climate, a couple of climate questions. Toya, I'm sorry.
No worries. I also want to talk about climate.
Speak up for yourself. I appreciate that. Thank you.
But I will talk about public safety, as public safety is also a health issue. And in that same vein, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And so when it comes to addressing public safety, if you can follow my logic here, if we're able to actually give people stability in their home, then they'll be able to be healthy and stable outside of their lives. As a lot of violence is interpersonal. It's like within the community. And that's why I would like to support any efforts for a universal basic income. I would like to support all efforts for community-based, culturally relevant interventions, especially for our youths. And also making sure that we're coming at this from a sense of transformative justice, that we're trying to heal our communities. And then in regarding to gun violence, as a native Kansan, I know how lax gun laws just lead to more accidents. And so I would really want to support safe gun storage, as well as more funding into domestic violence and suicide prevention support, as that's where a lot of our gun-related incidents do occur in the context of.
Thank you. I'm sorry about that. Now we'll move to climate. Moving to electrification may be more expensive for consumers. What, if any, is the role of the legislature to help residents and businesses meet this potential financial burden? And Toya, you go first.
Yeah. So thank you for the question. I suppose that there is a lot of fear around electrification, especially since historically, and I guess I say that in a loose term, perhaps like 7 years ago, it was more expensive. Yeah, and either you're getting new panels, or you're buying a really fancy new laundry machine or water heater. And so that's why I support inclusive financing. And so essentially what this is that you are able to buy the electrification, whether it be an electric stove, because we know gas stoves are bad for your health. And you're able to reap the benefits of that, whether it be health benefits or whether it be you're lowering your gas bill because you're no longer using gas appliances. And you're able to pay off the advancement, the mitigation that was done on your home as you go, as you reap the benefits. And then another thing I propose is cooperatively run utilities as well as solar, as we know that solar is cheaper than importing all the coal that we do, than importing all the natural gas that we have. And so I'm very optimistic, especially as we have new technologies such as geothermal coming in, that this is something that, paired with efficiency, energy efficiency, will make it a lot more manageable for our utility security.
Thank you. Katie?
I am so excited to talk about electrification because this is what I get to do in my day job. So I currently work for an energy efficiency nonprofit, and I run a program called Electrify Everything Minnesota. And we actually wrote we worked with the city on creating a study to understand what would it take to fully electrify all 1 to 4 unit homes in the city of Minneapolis. Unsurprisingly, it's a lot of money. It's about $2 billion in total. And for some context, we as folks who are owning 1 to 4 unit homes, we're already going to have to spend about $1 billion to replace our furnace when it dies, to replace our water heater when it dies anyway. So what is the responsibility of the legislature? I think it is to help support with funding and to help create utility programs that will also support that funding. It also means making sure that we have rates that electric rates that encourage electrification and make it economically beneficial to switch from gas to electric, because we have to be looking at not only the first cost, but also the ongoing cost. Because we don't want to be incentivizing someone to put in a heat pump and then it makes their heating bills go up. We have to be really thoughtful in this transition. It's not just first costs, it's those ongoing costs, and that's the type of thinking that I'll be bringing to the legislature around this issue.
Okay, thank you. The next question. Agricultural practices and urban stormwater runoff are the largest sources of water pollution in Minnesota. What, if anything, do you think should be done to address this? Katie?
I have so many thoughts because I'm a soil and water engineer by training. And so when it comes to agriculture, I think a big issue we have just in general is our monoculture. And we need a market and an incentive structure that would require, require different thinking about how agriculture works. There are some ideas out there around that, particularly around sustainable aviation fuels, and I haven't fully made up my mind on those things, but I think the idea of restructure or creating incentives within the market that would encourage cover crops around along a number of other things would help with soil erosion, for example. When it comes to urban stormwater issues, a number of things we need to be doing is allowing more infiltration or encouraging more infiltration on an individual property so that it's not running off. We can be doing that with things like, actually, I just installed and I took out my concrete driveway and I put in permeable pavers. So incentivizing and encouraging practices like that can help reduce the runoff. Also, I talked about we have a lot of roads and a lot of road surfaces. We should be asking our questions around how much of that do we need and how much do we want to maintain, because it has these lingering or not lingering, but these further down effects that are not good for our water quality.
Toya?
So In terms of agriculture, agriculture is our number one emitter of like carbon in Minnesota. And like was mentioned before, a lot of that does come from the monoculture, a lot of that does come from the way that we feed our livestock, as well as just the transportation of goods. One thing that I would like to support is essentially something that's called food, not feed. So focusing more of our produce, right, more of our agriculture to be focused on feeding people instead of on making fuel or feeding animals. And a lot of that will help, especially decrease the reliance on monoculture if we also stop subsidizing that as well. I also want to promote everything that I can to do farm to table, farm to school, farm to hospital, as well as what can be done to create subcontracts, especially as many governmental agencies are a huge sourcing power in making sure that we have subcontracts for local vendors of food. And then regarding to water in particular, I definitely promote planting of kernza, which is kind of this miracle crop, has a very, very long root to help sequester not only carbon, but also the water and help with soil erosion.
Thank you. Our next topic is transportation. What, if anything, would you do to continue building a transportation system that is accessible and safe for users of all abilities and income in Minneapolis and throughout the state? And Toya, you're first.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think that one of the things that are most important to consider is how people are even getting to the public transit to begin with. We have plenty of sidewalks here that are in disrepair, or perhaps they're like collecting melted snow and water, making it very icy. I've seen 2 elders just completely faceplant and injure themselves trying to get onto a bus. And we also currently, at least in Minneapolis, we have sidewalks that are being fenced off and makes it so that people just can't actually get to the public transit. Not to mention, in a lot of greater Minnesota towns and cities, they don't even have sidewalks. So that already de-incentivizes people to even be able to get there. Another thing that I definitely care about is having more transportation, more consistent transportation. I've been to Chicago, and I got to be out in one of the suburbs, and I was like, I don't think I'll get a bus on a Saturday at 9 p.m., and there one was every 15 minutes. And I'm like, this could be our reality here. And so in terms of making a better transportation system, I'm like, can I get to it first, and then can I have more of it?
Katie?
We all deserve safe and reliable and accessible ways to get around. You know, whether, I was talking to, a woman in Lowry Hill who wanted to make sure that she could still drive to Kowalski's to get her groceries, or my friend Bryce, who moves in a wheelchair. He's in Loring Park, and he wants to be able to get around both by public transit and by using sidewalks that are definitely in poor repair. And also, my friend Shane, who suffers from seizures, so he's not able to drive, but he's able to bicycle in a way that keeps himself safe but keeps his autonomy. So we need all of the options enabled to get around. And so I want to talk about a couple of pieces there. One around safety, because I've been hearing about that a lot on the doors. I've knocked over 23,000 doors in this district, and transportation comes up a lot, particularly around public transit. People don't feel safe on the light rail, don't feel safe on the buses. However, light rail seems to be the biggest issue. Although people I'm hearing good things about the Transit Ambassadors program. And so we are seeing more people writing it, people feeling more comfortable. So I want to take lessons learned from that and continue to expand it. And then secondly, I want to expand our bus rapid transit system. That is how we can get that 10 to 15 minute frequency. We've seen really excellent ridership increases, about 30% every time we put in a new BRT line. So I want to continue doing that at the legislature.
Okay, thank you. All right, move on to education. We have a couple of questions from education. How would you work to expand and strengthen dual language programs in the Minneapolis schools? And how would you advocate for dual language as a key strategy to support students in all of 61A? Katie, you're first.
Well, I'm in Minnesota because of a language camp, so I'm a big fan of people learning languages and the different perspectives and worldviews that you get from learning additional languages. I think, as I was talking about earlier, that it's important for different layers of government to recognize the different levels of authority that we have, and I don't want to step on the toes of our Minneapolis Public School Board because they are elected leaders as well. But where we can, direct funding from the state legislature to encourage more dual language learning, I would highly support that. And we need to recognize that we've got a lot of issues in our public, especially in MPS, with declining enrollment and with budgetary issues, and so I want to be making sure that we're closing the cross-subsidy for special education, that we do have enough funding for our English language learners as well. But there's a lot of needs in our public schools, and I think highlighting our dual language learning programs can help showcase the benefits of attending our public schools, and that's a huge asset. So the more that we can increase enrollment through that, I think the better off we'll be.
Thank you. And Toya?
Yeah, so thank you for the question about schools. This has definitely been something that I have heard a lot when talking to my neighbors, especially in regards to a lot of BIPOC and immigrant families, as the dual language program or and also like culturally sensitive, right, education accessibility is the deciding factor for people. Like, this is where they choose if they're going to a public school or if they're going to a charter school or somewhere else. And we have plenty of kiddos who are, coming in here who may be dominant in a different language, such as Spanish, and are able to be educated still in maths, in reading, or I guess social studies, other things, in the language that they're strongest in, while also being taught English because, well, they will be needing it to function as, good citizens here in the near future. And so, as far as supporting the dual language programs, one of my key strategies is also diversifying the funding for other parts of education. So we're talking about the playgrounds here, we're talking about the technology and such, so that schools have that more funding to be able to put into what is ultimately a deciding factor for so many Minnesotans to make sure that their kids are able to keep their language and their culture.
Okay, thank you. Well, actually, this question will allow you to expand a little bit on what you just talked about. So what do you think are the most important issues facing Minnesota public schools in terms of both funding and policy? What can be done in the Minnesota legislature to address these issues? And Toya, you're first.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So I would say what feels most visceral to my neighbors, what I've heard, is that ESL, English as a Second Language accessibility. As there have been kiddos who they predominantly speak Spanish, and their parents decided to take them to a predominantly Hmong school because they're like, well, at least they have the tools to be able to grapple with the second language, as English as a second language. And it also seems to me with how we're bringing in talent, right, as how we're treating our educators, that we have brought in a lot of Spanish speakers, Somali speakers, other types of speakers into our public health, into our public school system. And then we're letting all of that talent and investment go by not funding these programs and continuing to retain them. And yeah, I think that's my biggest, I guess, push, right? My biggest reason why we should be investing so much into dual language is because that is what people are making choices on. Like, this is what is most important for their family and for their kids and for themselves as students. So.
Thank you. Katie?
So every student in Minnesota deserves to have a quality education. And that's the promise of our public school system. But unfortunately, and not for lack of trying from our educators, we're not rising to the level that we want to be. And I think that's the result of a number of things. 20 years ago, under Pawlenty, there were cuts to the formula for student allotment in budgets, and that has not helped. And we've been at a deficit basically for the last 20 years in funding our public schools. We have an issue with the cross-subsidy for special education. That's something that I want to make sure that we're closing, and the same thing for English language learning. And I think also we need to be making sure that our public school dollars are being spent appropriately and have accountability with them. So I think we've seen in the past couple of days, actually, from the Star Tribune, some devastating articles around charter schools and the lack of accountability and the amount of failure rate of those. I think it's time to put a pause on new charter schools in Minnesota until we can make sure that they are fully accountable, and so that those public dollars are used appropriately. We also have demographic shifts that are happening in our state. We need to be mindful of those. I was actually just at a meeting that included the Minneapolis Public School Board, and they were noting those. So I'll have to end there.
Thank you. Our next category is equity and inclusion. Please describe the ways that you are making or would make your campaign in the legislative office more inclusive and accessible. And Katie, you're first.
So as I've mentioned from the outset, I'm running to build a more just, resilient, and thriving Minnesota, and it starts with justice for a reason. And that's why we've been focusing very heavily in our campaign, making sure that we're turning out the vote and reaching voters that have not historically been turning out in 61A. So focusing a lot, on folks who maybe have lower incomes, maybe are less likely to engage. During the DFL caucus process, I made sure to visit Elliott Park rather than going to Bryn Mawr, because I knew that was a demographic that wasn't normally prioritized by other DFL candidates. So I'm making sure that I'm making myself available at neighborhood association meetings in Harrison, in Elliott Park, in Lowry Hill East, because those are areas where there are higher proportions of renters, and again, people who don't normally engage. And also, of course, making sure that we're available on all the different mediums, from paper to digital, so that we can be in touch with people of all different stripes.
Toya?
Yeah, so resident of Elliott Park, so I have, of course, done a lot of outreach there as also a former board member of the Elliott Park Board. I know that for a lot of folks, even engaging with the government system is a re-traumatization. And I want to affirm that all this feeling of grief that people have, all of this feeling of betrayal that, like when I used to do affordable solar in Section 8 housing, people were like, I don't care what you have to offer me, I don't want it. Because how many times do you have to be betrayed before you just give up? So for me, I want to start with that trust building. I want to show, hey, I am a Latina person, right? I am queer. I struggle with PTSD. I have ADHD. I know what it's like for, my medication to be on back order for 2 months. I'm a renter. And for all of the ways in which I can't be in direct solidarity with my neighbors, I want to give that space to hear what their story is and also uplift that voice. Does this mean that if you want to speak your voice, do you need a stipend? Do you need a car to get there? What does it take? Do you need to be after hours? I want to make that happen.
Okay, thank you. We're getting very close to the end. I'm debating here what our last question will be. I'm sorry. Let's make it this one, your personal background and experience. How do you plan to listen to and communicate with and tap into the knowledge of your constituents, including those who cannot vote or those who did not vote for you? Toya.
Yeah, thank you for that question. One is that I'm very happy to be able to talk to all of my constituents, even if they can't vote and they tell me up front that they can't vote. And it does help that I speak Spanish, so there's a little bit of that language barrier that is that can be lifted. And another way that I want to tap into that knowledge is meeting people where they're at. Previously, I had a signature collecting session way back in May at a bus stop. And I'm like, if in between work and home is where I can meet you at, then I want to meet you there. And also to tap into that knowledge, a lot of it is being able to have that time to listen to these narrative stories, right? This narrative medicine that people are giving me. And as a facilitator, as I've facilitated many different groups for different styles and such, I also come with a trauma-informed approach, knowing that a lot of times people are coming to me as a person of the government to unleash all of their woe, and that I'm ready to receive that. I'm ready to receive that pain and grieve with you, and also to find ways in which I can elevate that voice and find a pathway to you and make sure that I never say, well, that's just not my jurisdiction.
Thank you. Katie?
I really like this question because at the end of the day, we're running for the Minnesota House of Representatives because, it kind of says the job description in the name. We're supposed to be representative of the district. And so that's why I've spent so much time knocking on doors, making sure that we're doing that outreach across the district to meet people where they are. And sometimes people don't want me to knock on their door, I get that. And so meeting them at neighborhood association meetings, meeting them at neighborhood cleanups, meeting them at open streets, in places where where people are, I think is really important. But I also think it's important to not overwhelm people. I don't know about you, but I don't need to hear from Amy Klobuchar every day or every week even, or other members, elected officials. So I want to be in dialogue with you as much as you want to be in dialogue with me. And so I plan to have regular communication via e-newsletters as well as a regular postal mailer as well, so you can hear what I'm up to, and then making sure that you know that I'm available via cell phone, via email, so we can set up one-to-one. I think a one-to-one meeting is the best way to get to know people, get to really understand what your issues are, and make sure that I'm doing what I can to either coordinate and help you solve your problem, or we can turn that into a policy.
Okay, and now the candidates have 1 minute to make their closing statements. And Katie, you'll go first.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I just need to set my timer here.
Yeah. So awesome. Well, thank you all so much for being here tonight. Thank you for the League of Women Voters and also for the Women's Club for hosting us. Thank you also for everyone who submitted a question, because it's through your questions we learn what's important to you. And like I said, there's no real job description for an elected office except kind of, at least in this case, in the name. Being a Minnesota House of Representative means representing those in the district. And what I'm hearing here is really like, what are the values of this district? And I think it's confirmed to me that this district cares about building a more just and resilient and thriving Minnesota. And so working on those themes and our shared values, I want to continue working together. And I'm ready to hit the ground running on day one to work for this district. And I humbly ask for your support on November 5th. So thank you so much.
Toya?
So, thank you everybody for coming. Vote for me if you want an equitable and just future. I have the lived and professional experience to make the change that we need, because the status quo is killing us. It's killing me. And so I'm here for all of my Black, brown, and indigenous neighbors, for my queer neighbors, for my disabled neighbors, for all of my neighbors who couldn't be here or who won't be here because they've lost trust in the system. Minnesota has taught me, well, that you, my neighbors, right, have taught me to believe in myself, and in that, to believe in the individual. And through this journey with candidacy, it's helped me see beyond, right, myself, beyond what has been told that is possible. Because politics has made me believe in that we're more universal and less polarized, actually.
Thank you very much. On behalf of all of the co-sponsors, I want to especially thank the candidates for being here and for being a part of the democratic process by running for office and for being willing to serve our community. I also want to thank the audience, both live and on screen, for being interested enough in your community to come to whatever this is called, a forum like this, not a convention, a forum like this. We hope this forum has helped you in District 61 make informed decisions in regard to the November 5th election. You can find nonpartisan information about candidates and about voting on another league website, vote411.org. Early voting for the general election begins this Friday, September 20th, and will end on Monday, November 4th. November 5th is the day when you can also vote in person. The video recording of this forum will be available, unedited, for viewing by the League of Women Voters website, again, lwvmpls.org. And excerpts or edited clips of the candidate forum may not be used for partisan or political purposes. And finally, most important of all, don't forget to vote. Your vote is your voice, and it's your power. Thank you for coming.